Okay, ready to do this, Dominic?
Yes, let's do that.
Perfect. Hello, hi everyone. Welcome to our webinar on invoicing. Thank you, Dominic, for joining us again. There's a few of you guys that reached out to Dominic last week, so thank you for that. And now we're hoping that we're going to be of good services moving forward. I've decided to make a little bit of change into the webinar, into the series. We had a couple of sessions that were coming, some workshop that might have not been as excited as I initially planned. So security and permission set, maybe a client keynote on security and permission set, while I still see some value and potential, might not have been the most exciting webinar. And the whole purpose of that webinar series was to try to teach and give kind of the art of the possible. We started that way, if you recall. So give you a tour of the product, where it's going, where it can go, where it can bring you, to make sure that all our team all our customer are leveraging all the feature. And it was also an attempt to really train and teach you, our customer. I hope and I do believe that we have succeeded in training some aspect of the platform. In terms of condensing it and making it really specific to the next three feature. So we're going to focus on invoicing today, but after that, we're going to do analytic and reporting as a client keynote. And after that, we're going to do service and community. And instead of doing one customer showcase per topic, per modules, we are thinking of doing a bigger one on March 10, where we're hoping to have a minimum of 4 customers to showcase, and it can be about any kind of module. So I think it's going to be a better event. It's going to be more interesting. And I think also because we are working on the documentation thing that we should be announcing release dates shortly, but we've done, I think, good training on the different modules. I want to refocus a little bit in terms of the product itself. So making a little bit more, giving a bit more pressure to our development team, and also to provide you our valued customer with added feature on a regular basis. So I want to do a client showcase every 2 months to be able to discuss those new features that we've been adding in the past few, the previous 2 months. Also to have some customer success stories to share, welcoming new customer. Like I want to build that exciting ecosystem with client customers. So we're going to welcome those announcements, such as, for example, the trail or the new training module we're developing, talking about this, and also having a segment to be able to do roadmap collaboration. So we can discuss about the roadmap and the feature set and where it's coming. So it's going to be it's a little bit of shuffling. It's always good within a mid project to do some realignment sometimes. I hope this you're going to be comfortable with that new calendar. I do believe it's going to fit better with the purpose of those meetings. What do you say, Dominic?
I think
Like
it's a good
this?
idea. Yeah,
Yeah.
based on the comments we received, I think there's a good response on what we did. So, but kind of reshuffling in this case makes sense. I couldn't find exciting necessarily super sexy stuff on security, though it's very important. But yeah, so I think it's a good idea.
Good. And there was another module called interconnection. That module I was thinking of, yes, talking about the bridge we have, but talking about a little bit about the objects architecture, but we've covered a little bit of it. So anyway, we have a lot of interesting stuff coming on the learning side of things with our client trail coming soon. So I think this should help us do the kind of roundabout of the different modules. Okay, so let's jump into the current module we're exploring today, which is invoicing. So the idea of running a professional service department or a consulting firm and having client as a tool is that you can run your entire operation, including invoicing. And if there's something important in professional services, usually it's the cash flow and making sure that those invoices are well tracked, nothing falling to the cracks, and that they are generated in a timely manner. We have a great example of a customer. Marie is one of the representative of that customer during those webinars, but you've been able to achieve a really compressed invoicing timeline. I think before, what was the the length, Dominic? Was it around 40 days to complete an invoicing cycle?
Yeah, I have a month and a half in mind.
So
Yeah,
now
so
with
yeah.
Client, a year after using it, they're close to 5 days, and I think they can go even shorter than this. So that's the purpose of having a good invoicing modules and tying all the invoices to the different projects. So that's the purpose. The different feature set that we have within Client. So it all starts with approval of timesheet and expenses. After that, we have a lot of different billing types, and we have invoicing mechanism that we can cover time and expense, milestone, invoicing documents, fixed fee. And after that, we can generate the PDF, or maybe you have another tool to generate the PDF, or maybe you just want to send those records to your accounting package. So the accounting package will send that PDF out to their customer. But we do have an invoicing document, a PDF document within Client we're going to see today. You can also track collection and payment, and sending those as well to your accounting package. So if you're using Xero, QuickBooks, or even in tax, Agent Tax, we're able to send that invoice directly to your accounting package. There's a nice feature that I don't think a lot of people know about, is the vendor invoice. We're going to cover it today. So vendor invoice, it's generating invoice on the behalf of your external consultant. So it eases up the job of consolidating the hours worked. We're going to also look at revenue recognition, which is a really hot topic in accounting, but in the US, there's been new rules in the past year, so it's important to have good revenue recognition templates. And we're adding a new functionality. Prepayment is one that's going to be added in the next few months. And there's some feature we're looking into, like task percentage billing. For now, it's a task completion more than percentages. So there's different aspects that we're looking at as well in terms of different scheme of invoicing. The goal is really to be able to generate effectively your invoices at the end of a cycle, that it should take only half a day or a day to generate the entire invoices, that you are able to track it, that your project manager can see it, and also that you can expose all that data to your team to see how much revenue they're bringing in. Yeah, invoicing is key. I think this is what's bringing a ton of value to the Client platform, is to be able to tackle that aspect of it too as well. Let's jump into the demo. The agenda, we're going to cover 3 different projects. So Dominic is going to show us 3 different projects. One, T&E, time and expense plus milestone, the same one we've been driving since the beginning of those webinar. After that, we're going to look at installments on a fixed fee project, then monthly retainer. We're going to look at that generation of invoice and the related object related to invoice. So there's 4, and there's different thing we can do with it. We're going to do a small thing about RevRec. And like I said, we're going to look at vendor invoice. This is a time saver when you were talking about rekeying data for your external consultant. Dominic, you want to show this slide right away, or you want to take control?
Yeah, well, I'll take control. That's what I'm showing to start with anyway. So yeah, we can share screen. But basically I can, okay, perfect. Share screen, perfect. So let's jump right in. Just before we go to the environment, I just wanted to show this, and if you circle back to the recording or any information, that information is also available on the client's website. So these are different billing types. There's seven options here, so that we can configure our projects differently, and then apply to the different type of approaches that we may have with our customer. So the ones that we'll be talking about, that are a bit more detailed. The other ones are similar, or kind of spins of the same similar things. We'll go with the time and expense, in this case, installments and retainers. Basically, the time and expense here is kind of the broader one, with more or less grab anything that is billable on your project. As a matter of fact, if you don't have any billing types on your project at this point, it would be considered as the time and expense by default. And the installments and the immediate are similar, based on dates. We'll see with the project billings there. Recurring and retainer are based on a recurring, monthly, weekly, or yearly recurrence of fees. Retainer has a spin to it where we have a notion of time entries also and time spent on the project, like for managed services, sorry, where we have recurring fees based on a number of allowed hours. So we'll go on to those. Obviously, there's percentage complete based on the percentage complete of the project itself. Yanick talked about something that eventually would be considered about task completion, but really this one is on the whole project percentage completed based on an expected revenue and percentage of what was invoiced in the past and what remains. And in fixed fee here is a bit of a general one where it would only use or consider fixed fees on the projects themselves. So any time that would be marked as wouldn't be considered on those, but the milestones and project billings would be. So I'll jump into the environment from here. So as I mentioned, we're going to start off with the same project we've been working on since the beginning of this series here. So we have one project which was the PSA implementation. In that case, just renamed it so that we have a clear distinction in between the different billing types that we have and we'll be demoing here. So just to review there, here this is a time and expense. And if you recall, we had some milestones that were added with a milestone amount. So I'm just going to jump right back into my Gantt just to show that. Do a quick refresh here, where we can review that as either as a PM when you're setting up or when you're setting up the project here. Sorry, my Chrome is giving me a bit of challenge here. So when you're setting the project up, or if you're a PM reviewing where your project is, you can use that grid view here of the Gantt chart where you can review any milestones that would have been set and even at some point also how my project is doing. So here I've added a few columns so that I could show more information on here. So you could use it. I've just clicked here on grid so I don't have that visual part. It might be just reviewing some of the data, maybe reviewing that to display or show to the customer or just to report and make sure that everything is under control. But quickly here, if I scroll down, I'll see that I have some milestones here that were set, and we do have some milestone payments. These milestones, as they are marked as completed, when you mark it as complete, there will be a date that will be stamped as completion date. It should be the day that you're marking that as complete. That can be modified if you need to date it back because it was completed a week ago. You can come and modify that date. So this is the date where it's going to be considered for invoicing. Okay, so these both are now in February. So we'll see when we generate the invoice, we'll have them pop up on our list here. And as we said, when we have a milestone that has a milestone payment and it is complete, then it's going to be considered for invoicing. And I still have some tracking here where I have some estimated billable hours or total hours. That's always a good thing also to review. Billable hours, if you recall, when we don't have that logged notion in between parentheses, means that it is approved. So there's a difference between hours that could be logged or total hours logged and billable hours, meaning that you might have some hours here. If that number was to be different in those two columns, you might have some hours that are pending approval here. Just so that's the difference here we have on the projects, and it will influence eventually your invoicing. So for that, really the setup in this case, it's a time and expense. So billing type would be the time and expense in this case. Obviously, we need to have the project set as billable. And in that case also, you can have a, and I might have mentioned that also, you could have a mix and match in a project of billable task and not billable task. So it's just making sure that, that your tasks are checked as billable. Because if you have a billable project with tasks that are marked as non-billable, the time logged against those tasks wouldn't be picked up by invoicing. So a good thing to review that.
But they would count for cost.
They would count for cost. They would count towards your total, maybe
worked hours and also
worked
the
hours.
resource cost.
But yeah, they wouldn't be picked up for invoicing in that case. So, in here, as far as time and expense, what you need to, on the project itself, what you need to keep track of will be mostly your timesheets to make sure that they're approved, and the milestones would be managed within your project itself. There's not necessarily a project billing that is created for milestones. It's really the task that drives that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cover those 3 projects the way we set it up before, and then we'll go to generate the invoice. So now I'm going to jump into my installment project. Good. Any question? Any other question, Yanick?
Oh, so this was a time and expense, and this one was a 10 expense and milestone, but you could have just milestone project and no time at all. So just invoicing when you're delivering something, or you're coaching or training or delivering your solution. And now installment, it could be, for example, a fixed fee project where you have 3 payments, or you spread across a full year of payments, but this is a fixed number of payments. Is that what is?
Exactly. And just to to add a note there on the projects that would be only milestones, this is where I would use a fixed fee selection. So then you'd be sure that you gather only the fixed fees, and then that will kind of protect your, or kind of control what is being invoiced.
And if you put fixed fee, even if you're logging hours, they won't be picked up for.
It would no. It would only pick up the project billings and the milestones in that case. So closing that parenthesis. So yes, installment, really, the difference is the milestone is something that can move in time. It's a date. It's dependent on your project plan. So for some reason, if a preceding task is stretched or compressed, your milestone might move in time because your deliverable might come earlier or later. So a milestone is a bit more flexible and will be affected based on your project plan. Installment is more of a dated payment that you have that will be fixed in time. So it wouldn't be, it doesn't need to be completed. It's just programmed. It's a program project billing that on a fixed date.
And it's something that we don't see on the project plan either, right? We see it on the project object with the details, but you don't see it. You don't see like a milestone icon or anything for project billing.
Yeah, usually more control upon maybe agreements with the customer in sales, or the invoicing pattern that you've decided. So something that is programmed upfront, and that usually PM won't have to care for in a sense along the way. It's just a fixed date.
And it's on the more on the back end stuff than the front end.
So when you generate a project that is of type installments, you will have the differences that you will have a project billing that will be created automatically. So here we have a project billing that can be created based on the expected revenue. Okay, so I'm gonna go go into the project billing itself, and gonna show what it is.
Let's just wait a minute. So let's say I create a new project. I'm gonna put a billing type as installment. And after that, I'm going to put a estimated revenue at, in your case, it was 40,000. Okay. And then in the configuration, just before the project billing is generated, the duration, is there the number of installments?
When it's an installment, it's going to generate kind of the container. So the project billing here in the structure is a project billing. So project billing is going to be created for a total. And I think here I just, when I played around with the numbers, initially it was 20K in my case. So let's say my project has expected revenue of 20K, and it is installment as a billing type, then it's going to create that container itself. Then you still need to go and program those dates in, because it depends on how many slices do you want to have and when are they going to occur. So that container is created up front. If it's not created because you change along the way, no issue. You just go and create the project billing manually. But if you know at the creation of the project, you have a project template maybe that you're using that has installment, then the expected revenue would automatically generate that. If you were to generate a project and you wouldn't put the expected revenue, then that would be zero. So you need to come back and change it. So here we'll focus on that section up top. Really, in this case, start date, end date is not necessary here, but more of a maybe project start date and end date. The start date and end date are used more for recurring and retainer. We'll see later. But basically, we just have an amount and we have a project and we have a billing method here. Okay. And then at the bottom here, we come, or whatever is your project page layout, but we would come and generate those different project billing lines. And a project billing line, basically, in this case here, if I was just to input, would be a title here, a name that you want to give. So maybe it's some indication of this the slice that that you want to be described on your invoice, and a percentage of a total amount or a set amount. So it's you either put 25% like I did, or you put a fixed amount there to generate it. So that's the only thing that the date would be when it's going to be invoiced, the name, the percentage, or an amount, and that's all you need at this point. So now I have, just as an example here, 3 that are created, one in February, one in March, and one in April. Their set date with percentage, and we have a naming here that can be identifying them.
So you would create that once at the beginning of a project. Often, even it's either the project coordinator that would create those, or even the accounting team that could come in and create those. And then after that, you don't need to touch it. Those are going to be picked up when you're going to generate your invoice for the invoice period.
Exactly. Pretty straightforward. That would be similar if you were to have an immediate. So we haven't covered that one specifically, but the immediate project billing would be just a one set fit, one in project billing at the creation of the project. So it's similar. It's a date. It's a project billing line ultimately that we're invoicing, but you still have that same type of structure using the same objects.
Okay.
Next one here, another type of project that that we're going to review is the retainer. So similar mechanism than we just talked about for installment, meaning that if we select the retainer, we have an expected revenue. In that case here, we're using the same type, as I'm saying, the mechanism. So we're creating a project billing based on the expected revenue. So when you generate that project, that expected revenue in this case would be let's say your monthly recurring fee. So there's a slight twist here. So if you do that and you put your expected revenue over a year, you'll just have to modify it in the project billing if it was to be the monthly or the weekly or the yearly recurring fee. Okay. So same thing, retainer is selected, expected amount, and then I get to my project billing, and I have a retainer that is a pre-program here that I've done prior. But just to give you the example here, basically a retainer is a monthly or recurring fee that has a certain limit of hours here. So this is the kind of a mix of a fixed fee with time and expense on top of it, is that if you have a set number of hours, and then if you exceed those hours, any exceeding hours would be counted toward your invoice eventually to a set excess rate. So any hours in this case that would exceed 30 hours in a month or in that period would be charged at 200 per hour exceeding.
So the use case is really it's either a retainer that you or an amount of money that you would support contract, for example, that you might have with a customer that you're going to pay a fixed amount per month, but you're limiting the number of hours. And if they go over, if that checkbox is checked, meaning that all the exceeding hours on top of the 30 will be charged at that excess rate.
Exactly.
Right.
Meaning that, and then that fixed amount wouldn't be, if the customer doesn't pay or doesn't use these hours, he's still paying for them. Okay, so that's the concept here.
Or any kind of managed services kind of projects, or like pure retaining project. Yeah.
So in this case, we do have a choice here of doing it monthly, weekly, and annually. And just as a side note, I did have the request once or twice of quarterly. So if we have to put something on a potential roadmap, that'd be interesting to have also. Customer, I've had that request once or twice of quarterly. So that could be interesting. But for now, these are the 3 choices that are available that we can play with.
There's a question from Katie. Where do we set or see the retainer billing type? If they're not seeing it now, it's because of 2 things. There's the object to be created and the pick list.
And there's a configuration object which is called billing type. So it's a list of all the billing types that are available. So it might just be that you haven't created that line is not created. So it's just a matter of hitting new here, and that retainer should be available. That is an object that has a few default values for some of them, but it gives you the possibility of branding the billing type to something that makes sense for you. So the billing methods are what we're looking. It's about the same thing basically, but it's just that you can rebrand if language is hourly, or you call something else a retainer in your language, then you can brand it like you want.
The other question, are you reading it?
Yes, can you see it so that there's no shortfall of hours in 1 month getting carried over? Yeah, it's really on a month-to-month
just maybe
basis.
just repeat the question, maybe.
Sorry, yeah, Can you set it so that if there's a shortfall of hours in 1 month, it gets carried over into the allowance for next month, meaning that if there's any overage payments, is managed on a cumulative rather than monthly basis.
Out of the box, I don't think so.
No, out of the box, it's really on the month-to-month. So it's going to be the way it's managed. So that's it. There's no carryover from month to month in this case for now.
There's definitely a way that we could do that in a custom way. Definitely, I understand the value of it, and there's different rules usually as well. So it's going to be a maximum of 3 months carryover with a maximum amount. So the rules can get quite complex and different between each industry. So we'll see if that makes it to the list of future improvement.
So the just to wrap this one up here. So the monthly, if you were to choose something else, then the different payments are recalculated. The billing lines will recalculate automatically based on the recurrence. So when you first set this up, you come into your project billing, you select what is the recurring period. So you still, like the installments, once you first create the project, you need to go and configure your project billing and project billing lines and finalize it, selecting the period, validating the different values you might have on the retainer, and the billing lines will generate automatically.
A request from Katie might be to improve the product by having it, instead of having only one rate, having it as based on a rate card. Could be interesting. Michael,
yeah.
our project manager, if you product manager, if you're on the line, please take a note. Well, I'll convey that information. Good.
So basically,
maybe, can you just scroll down? I think before you change, I think that the graph on the right. I'm not sure if it was your intent, but we've discussed this the other day, and we're going to talk more about analytic and reporting. But you see, the project billing is also an object that's related. Project billing lines or billings are related to the project. So if you wanted to bring those graphs, because you don't see it in the Gantt, but at least you can see it directly in the project like that. So if you want to make it the first thing you see when you open up the page, you put that graph on top, so they know exactly when that next project billing is coming, for example.
Yeah, in the case the other one was recurring, but here, as we have different dates, you could have that in time so that you can at least have a bit more visual on a regular invoicing pattern like that. Excellent. So these are the 3 types at this point where we have that we want to show. The other thing I want to cover before I jump out and go elsewhere is that for the next or the later steps that we'll have as far as RevRec, we have a configuration here that needs to be done on different projects so that we either include them for RevRec or not. So it's each projects can be configured for RevRec or not, depending on what type they are. If you have internal projects, obviously you might not RevRec that, but so that you can have that discrepancy in between project to project. And you would select billing revenue templates also on a per project basis. Okay. So I'll be ready now. As you know, we've lived through our projects a bit. I have I've cheated a bit. I've had some timesheets generated and approved beforehand, so that when we get to our generate invoice, have some data that I can show. So really generate invoice here is that we can be selective on the period that we want to cover. That would consider that period anything that is, either the time, the billings, or the milestones that are marked as completed. Then the dates that they're tagged to would need to fall within those range. And we do have a approve or not approve, so that usually if you're not necessarily approving everything, you could consider the non-approved time also.
Usually, this process would happen at the end of your billing cycle. First, let's say every month. This could be done by your accounting team, your AR team. It can also be done by your project coordinator. So the idea is you approve all your time, and then you come in and you're able to generate the invoices for a subset of accounts. So it's providing a lot of flexibility, and as you will see, it's really easy. But this role usually it's also comes along with a dashboard for invoicing, so you can see what has not been invoiced. Is there any remaining hours from the previous month that I need to consider here? So that part we left it on the side, but also usually there's an invoicing dashboard before you come here, a dashboard that is usually used by the accounting team.
So when you're here ready to generate those invoices, we have two choices where we can either search by account, and the projects are going to be regrouped by account. So as you see here, I have that deep dive project, and we have those two. Or in this case, we'll just go by project. So where we have a list of all projects, and we can generate independent invoices for each of those. So these two options are available also. So I gathered everything that was from February 1st to 28th. So really what we get here is kind of a heads up or summary table that gets you all those different amounts that you have separated by fixed, either milestones or project billings. Again, the time, any time that is marked as billable and that has a total amount that is non-negative also, so that if you're expecting at some point that you see some time that should be billable but you don't see it, it might be also either that it's not approved or that you don't have a bill rate, so that you don't necessarily have money attached to that time that should be billable. So it's just a heads up to go back to your project and make the proper corrections. And expense also here. So if you have any expense that are marked as billable, then they are approved. Same here. Then they would be up there on that table.
There's a concept of organization on the right that we didn't talk a lot, but client can be used by multiple companies, so multiple legal entities. So let's say you have a sister company, or you have a different branding for different practices. You can generate your invoice based on companies, and depending on what organization you have access, you could generate invoice for only one. So, but that's also if you are dealing with a multiple legal entity, then client can definitely help you here as well.
So the one that comes up is the one that is on the project. So we have the default one, or we have the ones, per project, we can define the organization. So I'm gonna, we could mass generate. For now, I'm gonna generate all those three here, the examples that I have. So I'm gonna create invoice for all those three at the same time. So it's a one, you can launch your process and have all those invoices generated so that you can review them after one by one. But at least this is kind of generating all the records here, and it gives me a summary of what was generated. So here we can dig in, and I'll go into this one here. So now I'm looking here at the installment. I might be using this other one here instead. So the retainer. Basically, so just to review the object. So I'll start with this one. No, sorry. I'll change my mind. I'm going to start with the time and expense here, just to be consistent.
Only the fools don't change their mind.
Yeah, so because this one has more records, that is a bit more interesting to review. So really, when you get to that structure, that architecture of an invoice, so you have the master or the envelope or the container here that gathers all the information. Here we have a section where we put any payment information. If financial, obviously, all that is the summary of that, everything that needs to be paid on this, where it's separated by labor, expense, fixed fee, and eventually additional amounts. So we have those categories. In this case, if you recall, this is the time and expense with milestones. So I have a mix of a bit of everything in this one. So the different objects that we have, and then we'll just jump on the other page here. So really the structure, invoice line item is anything that is time. So any time that is billable would get there. So you would have a summary of the invoice or the line that is that was gathered, the time entry, the resource, the task that was linked to, and any information on the hours that have been punched with their bill rate. This is linked to the timesheet split, so the timesheet split's going to know if it was invoiced or not. So it relates back to the actual timesheet. So there's a tracking here of everything. So if you have any hours that are pending in the system that have not been invoiced, you can have reports to flag that. The other thing that we need to understand also, if ever you need to kind of fudge or do corrections, you don't necessarily need to go back. It depends on what type of correction, but you have capability of modifying that invoice line here and not necessarily affect the timesheet itself. So for some customer, they do round up or do change buckets for invoicing purposes, but they still want to keep the timesheet split clean and as is. It's possible. It's not, if you change something here on the invoice line item, it is not going to change it on the timesheet split.
This is key because it's really a copy of the timesheet, kind of a copy of the timesheet split, but meaning that you can change data here. And for example, a simple example is the timesheet notes. Let's say there's a typo or there's something that the customer is going to flag. You don't want to regenerate your invoice. You don't want to change a project or ask the guy to change a project. You can just go ahead and change it here.
Yeah.
And there's the include as well checkbox. I'm not sure if you're going to talk about it.
No, it's a good point. The include is if you uncheck the include, it's not going to be considered for that invoice, and it's going to be released for the next invoicing process. So, and that is to say also that if you release something that is marked as billable, and it's going to keep popping up on your generate invoice until you actually treat it or uncheck it from being billable also. So if you uninclude, it's going to be available for the next invoicing pass.
You can uninclude to keep track that it was there, but it was a decision for you to remove it, or you can even delete the line, I believe, right?
Yeah. Yes, it does the same thing ultimately. If you delete the invoice line, it's not deleting the timesheet split, obviously. It's going to pop up again on the next one.
And we had a question, I don't recall who asked it, but it was about, I think Exlibris mentioned that they were generating different invoice for different account on the same project. So for example, you could from here remove some of the lines, so they're going to be released, and then you can do another invoice and just change the invoice account so you can generate. So that's one way that you can define, okay, let's not charge that line right away, we'll wait for the next invoice, or you can even do something with accounts as well.
Exactly. Yep. So that's for and same concept here for expense items. So any expense that were marked as billable, then it would come back here. Include is the same for every type of objects. Also on the invoice, the include works for all. In this case, it is also linked to the expense line item. So any lines that were marked. So you can have a report of expense that has some mix of billable and not billable. Obviously, only the ones that are billable going to be picked up if the expense report was approved prior. Fixed fee, anything that is a milestone. You see here what I have. These were on the project's 2 milestones that that were marked as complete. They were brought up here and the task name itself.
There would be also a project billing. It would be it, right? It would be a
exactly.
Fixed fee.
Yeah.
And if you just go back and click on the fixed fee, so quite often you could sell a package like we're saying in our example, or you could sell like this is a package. So you could even link to the Salesforce product. If you do have Sales Cloud, you could even link it to the Salesforce product so you can know which invoice or which product has been invoiced, and even calculate your revenue per product on Sales Cloud. So you can make some binding between the Sales Cloud product and the invoicing in Client, so you can get more data and visibility on what sells more on your product list.
And last but not least is the additional line item to wrap, just to segue on this. You could have also products that you're adding directly on your invoice through the additional line item. So the line item is really something that is flexible that you can add directly. It's not getting, out of the box. It doesn't pick anything from the project. It's really just flexibility at the invoice to do corrections. So if you were to do credits, or write-offs, stuff like that, as less as possible. But if you have to do that, you can do that with additional line item, and the products can be added also to your invoice through an additional line item if
If you
you
wanted,
have
yeah.
Salesforce Cloud, Sales Cloud.
And if you wanted, for example, the Drakia prepayment modules, when they developed it, they used that additional item for those lines. So it's easy to know that it's not necessarily part of the rest of the project. It's not, so it's really, you have the flexibility to use that for pretty much everything you want.
So the other, just time being time conscious here, we just have 20 minutes. So really, it's the structure here is repeatable, and it's going to show you what you have, and it's going to relate back to your project. So whatever you have here, it creates the links.
I'm not sure. Were you planning to show the preview PDF button, Dominic?
Yes.
Yeah, it's okay. So as you see, and we did some improvement on this from the past. For everybody that's tried that button in the past, the result was pretty terrible, but now you're able to at least change the font. There's more checkbox on the invoice itself to define which column you want to show. So this, as you see, and then there's the payment information box that's been added to. But when you have a simple requirement for invoicing, this would be the trick. You select your icon as well, and it generate the PDF, and then from here you can save it and you can send it directly by email as well. Yeah, that's the generation of the PDF. If you need something more, if you need to recreate some grouping or present it in a different way, or put some, let's say, values that we don't have out of the box like this, you can always use a document generation tool like FormStack or Conga or Nintex.
What's this one here? The installment.
RevGen,
That's not.
maybe? No, I think.
Yeah, Rev.
Yeah. Do you want to show project billing? Is that what you?
Yeah, the only one I wanted to show is the retainer. So really, and then we can skip, but retainer would show you basically what all the times that was gathered, so that you have this. And I probably clicked too quick on this one, but as for retainer, and this is an example, you will have all the lines that contributed to do that amount for that month. So you have that traceability. You see, as default, they are not checked here, and you have a fixed fee that should be gathered. But I think it probably missed the date here and don't have one. But the fixed fee here would be showing as monthly fee, and you have another one which would be excess amount. So calculated on the amount that is exceeding that 30 hours that I had, then you have two fixed fee here. So I think I probably went too fast on my dates there. But this is, you'd still have the line items unincluded, and then we have the fixed fee. So yeah, so if just again, we'll probably jump here to the RevRec so that we can still have time.
So revenue recognition, maybe just while you load it. So revenue recognition, it's let's say you it's really about accounting and charging amount of money prior, and you need to tell your how many your accounting team. Let's say you have a project of 100 hours. If you work 30, you cannot impact your books and say that you still owe money, right? I'm losing my accounting lingo, but you have some deferred revenue that need to stack up, and then and we need to change and move those as the work is being completed. So the RevRec is going to help your accounting team define that amount that should be considered as worked, and that can be accounted as real revenues. Dominic, you're going to be better than me to explain that, I'm sure.
No pressure. So RevRec here, we're going to do a transaction to start with. That's a similar interface as we had in Generate Invoice. So it's a Visualforce page that is there to help us do that. So we can have obviously some filterings on regions, account practice, or specific projects if you want it. But if you just want to look into all that is in your system, we just need to have a date at which the transaction is going to be stamped. So it's not going back in time to say what it looked like at that moment. It's going to look at how it is right now, and it's going to stamp it as of today based on the numbers you have. Okay, so it's not as historical. It's really as of whenever you look into it, but it's going to use that date to stamp. So what we have, and I don't know that we'll have time to go into there, but what, have different billing templates that can either be, and I have something here that could be useful just for posterity, for the on the recording, so that we have different types of revenue templates that can be used. So you can decide the how you recognize and the what you're recognizing. So in which you decide if it's a percentage complete, equal split. So each month, from start to end date, we have an equal split based on whatever number of months you have, or the billing events. So as you're billing stuff on your project, these amounts become available to be recognized. And then we have the what. So we have either contract clients or invoiced amount. So you can have a mix of any of those here. So 6 total, permutation possibilities. So as I retrieve here my data, everything that is marked as include and RevRec will pop on that window. It's going to show you total revenue that is on each of those contract lines. You can have different contract lines for the same project. So as we see here, we have one project but 6 contract lines. Could be different efforts you have. This case might not be percentage complete, or you'd have to do kind of an interpretation of those numbers and what you want to recognize where. But you could have more than one contract line per project if it made sense. In this case, for those that I just created, I only have one contract line per project with different revenue templates. This one is based on percentage complete. My project is 15% completed. It suggests me that amount, so I could decide to recognize it. If I was to say yes, go create a transaction. So this one would stamp information on the project, and there would be revenue recognition details and summary that you can trace when it was recognized, and it stamps some of the information on the project itself, so that you have that data that it can be traceable, exportable for something else, maybe some finance reports and stuff. You can use different reports to communicate that also. So here I see it, I have a recognition detail that was done. So this is where I get my traceability. So on my project, based on that contract line, I have so many dollars that were recognized in this period. So on this transaction, and I have a total of 5,000 as a whole that was recognized up to now. It was the first time I was recognizing revenue on that one. So these two numbers are the same for that reason. And that would roll up to, as different objects, the contracts. So the service contracts would also have kind of a umbrella to get different contract lines that could be from different projects for the same customer. So that structure of contracts and contract line would help you track those revenue recognition transactions. So rather simple process, but and then at this point, when we do those stamps, we could think of having other kind of snapshots on the project and built in, so that you have a good, kind of a snapshot of where it was, what was the progress, what were the total number of hours that you've consumed in that project when those recognition details were generated.
Awesome.
Let's use 13 minutes to talk about vendor invoice.
Perfect. Okay, so I'll switch screen. Okay, should see it.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so vendor invoice. Let me explain the concept first. So as you know, we can have external resources working in the system, meaning that they're not a consultant, not on your payroll. They're charging you by the hour. They're still logging all. You need the hours to be logged on your project. So this is what we're going to talk about vendor invoice. So how many hours those external consultants have logged on your project and how much they should be charging you. And for that, we're going to even be able to generate their invoice for them. So instead of them tracking their hours in their own payroll system or their own kind of PSA or Excel grid, they can just enter time in your system and then you can generate the invoice for them. So that's the concept here. So we're talking about external resources. So we have here on my screen, we have James Gates. That is a resource in our system. As you can see, he's not a user, meaning that he's not able to log time on the platform by himself. We are going to be able to log time for him. If it was an external resource, as you see, it's marked as external resource, but it had a user, it could have access through the community, for example, or if you wanted, you could provide them a license, but you can also have them access through the community for them to log their time. Okay. So the only difference with this guy, he's an external resource. He's not a user, and as you can see, he's not linked to our organization either. But he has a vendor. He's part of the Bedazzling vendor, so one of our vendor that we're using for external resources. And as any other resource, he has a bill rate and a cost rate. The cost rate is important here because it's going to come bring back the information for the invoice. So, okay, so we have James. If I'm clicking on Bedazzling vendor, it's a company, the same type of company that we had for Brainbox, which is the company we've been running since the beginning. So we have the information about the vendor. As you can see, you can even put the logo of the vendor here. And then when I go on the related list, it could be a single guy. Let's say you have an independent contractor, or it can be a pool of resources under that vendor. So you see here I have several resources. So let's say James is working your project. He doesn't have a user, so I do have to do manual entry. Manual input is time entry. Usually what's going to be most beneficial is that you would provide him a community license. Those are cheap, and this way you will never have to rekey timesheet information. This being said, now where I'm going to switch to the My Timesheet window. And as we mentioned before, you can switch and you can enter time for somebody else when you have the right. So here, because I have those rights, I can switch to James. James already put this time for Monday and Tuesday, and I'm gonna put another 4 here for Wednesday, and I'm gonna save. So again, I'm doing it for him. He could have done it from the community, or he could have done it if he had his invoice. So at the end of a cycle, pretty much the same thing as the invoice, you can come here and we have something called create vendor bill. Okay. Create vendor bill. It's again, it's the same similar UI that you're going to change a date, a range of date when it's going to load. And I'm going to select the month of February up to today. And I'm going to look for unapproved hours for now. So it's going to look for all my vendor in the system and all time that have not been picked up by that mechanism so far. So I do have 12 hours of time that can be taken out. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to select my organization again, Brainstorm Box. I'm going to create that invoice. So now, same thing, same concept. We're gonna have a new invoice object record that will contain all the information related to that specific time block. So here I have the number of labor amount, hours and amount. If there were tax, I could also include taxes. And then when I'm looking at related, I also have the same thing. So you have the time lines. You could also have expense lines, and you could even have additional items, same as Dominic described for the regular invoices. You can use them for write-off or adjustment or any kind of modification. So as you can see here, I have all those times. And what's great as well is that when you just put the preview PDF, when you click on that button, it generates that invoice as if it was sent by Bedazzling vendor. So actually you're generating the invoice in behalf of him, of your vendor. So, and this way you're sure that's what's happening because those hours are tied to your project. You don't need to reconcile with your project manager and the consultant. So it saves a lot of pain and it definitely streamlined the job of everybody in operation. So I think this is a lesser known feature, but has a lot of potential to improve the life of the accounting people in the group.
So it contributes to your, it's using the cost there to the cost of the resource to generate that labor amount. And on the other side, you would probably, maybe if you're billing to the customer on the other side, then you'll have the bill rate that would be leveraged for your internal, invoicing towards the customer. So there's the two sides of locking in those hours, even for what you're going to be invoiced yourself. Good.
Excellent.
We had a question from James on the example to categorize the invoice by
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah, for QuickBook, is that it?
Yes. So
Yep.
that if we, yeah.
No, it's Alex answered it. It's not. It's on the roadmap to improve.
Okay.
But it's not there yet. Is the expense supporting document issue resolved for vendor invoice? Document issue resolved. I'm not sure, Susan, to understand if the if you're talking about the screenshot,
The
the
receipts.
image, the receipts. If it's the case, yes. Otherwise, we're gonna wait for your next comment. Yeah, yeah, it does support it. I can double check, but I'm pretty sure it does. It does bring it as well. Expense note, split time sheet notes. Let me double check. Maybe if one of the team here can answer as well.
Does your out of the
They were not
box?
working a week ago. Okay, so let me double check with the team then. Does your out-of-the-box QuickBook integration integrate mapping ability to push vendor invoice to QuickBook? I know we do it with Intact because I have sync result here. I don't think we do it with QuickBook yet. Alex, again, if you can maybe answer this one, otherwise we can answer after the webinar. We do have a lot of requests for improvement for the QuickBook connector. Based on payment, vendor invoice, if we're pushing it, I think there is still improvement that can be done. So most probably within the next cycle, we're gonna upgrade or do some modification or enhance that QuickBook connector. So Susan and Katie, we've took your notes and we'll follow up with you directly. Anything else, Dominic? That's it. Dominic, still there?
Yes. Yeah. I'm having trouble with my Zoom, so it froze. So yeah, sorry.
No worries. Awesome. So thank you very much for your time. Like I said, there's going to be a little bit of change. We're going to send you an email, but next week we're going to talk about reporting and analytics. So we're going to look at the different kind of object and how to create dashboards and reports and what we can easily do to bring those reports in different views. And the week after is going to be services. And after that, we're going to come back for the customer showcase. So thank you very much for your time and talk to you next week. Thank you, Dominic.